Hello everybody, it is the end of holiday season and I'm back to working full-time. So I'm a postdoc here at Yale University, and now I'm going to speak a little about USCE because a lot of you have been asking me all about electives, observerships, and how to go about them. So let's start off with defining USCE, United States Clinical Experience. It is basically the experience that you acquire by working in a US health-based system. Now, it is important because you have to gather experience in an American system, but you also need letters of recommendation which will be useful towards your application when you're applying for residency. Now, USCE is just not important for the letters of recommendation, but some programs like surgical residency actually require a minimum of 6 months to 1 year of USCE in certain programs. In these cases, USCE actually becomes more important than your scores themselves, believe it or not. So let's try by understanding what forms of USCE exist, and I will discuss specifically about electives in this video. Now, what are the different kinds of USCE? Electives, observerships, sub-internships, sometimes even doing a prelim year may account towards a USCE. So let's focus on electives for the purpose of this video, and then we'll discuss more about different USCEs in subsequent videos. So for electives, here's a list of questions which I believe all of you will have when you're looking for electives or applying to them. So let's look into the first question. Who all are eligible? Any medical student from most countries across the world are eligible to apply for electives in an ideal situation. Now, some schools in the US require your medical schools to have formal affiliations with them before you can come. So you may or may not be eligible for these electives at these programs. What are the prerequisites? So you have to be a student. You should not have had graduated. You should have taken TOEFL because almost all electives require you to have TOEFL scores. And it's not a very difficult exam. You can be done and dusted with it in about 4 weeks with good preparation. And you could do with scores of about 100. Now, some electives like the one at NIH required about a cutoff of 116 or 117 when I applied. But I don't know what the most recent update is now. Now, the third thing is step 1 score. Some electives need step 1 scores and some do not. So there's a huge list out there which programs need step 1 scores, which programs need just the TOEFL scores. Now, the third question, can I apply to multiple electives? Absolutely. In fact, you should apply to about 3 to 4 electives because when you're applying for residency, you need about 3 to 4 letters of recommendation, and it would be perfect to have different letters from different programs so that it strengthens your application even more. Now, the fourth and a very important question is, what is the application process like? So the most important part of it is actually the timeline. Always plan 6 months ahead. If you want to apply for an elective, say in October, now is the time that you should start looking. Most programs also have a fee, while some do not. So the fee can range anywhere between $100 to $1,000 for the application alone. You may or may not get accepted, but you will still end up paying the fee. So do your research and find out which programs have what fee, and the list is all out there. Now, what forms would you need to fill? Each program has its own specific forms that it requires you to fill. While for immunization and health forms, there is a standardized AAMC form, which is required at most places, which speaks about immunizations and your health checkups. That is pretty standard, but all the other forms could vary between different programs. Now, how to plan electives in a way that you can maximize your efficiency and time in the States and yet strengthen your application to the fullest. So first thing first, plan your electives right before CS. Now, I spoke of this in a previous video that it not just saves money, but also time, and you can be well prepared for your CS when you're doing your electives. Second, and an important consideration, is to plan your electives at places that actually have given residency spots to international graduates or are willing to look at you as a good candidate. While it is good to be ambitious, and I am not a naysayer, it's always wise to do your research and invest your time and money appropriately. The third and a very important consideration is you should be planning your electives in the subspecialty that you're interested in pursuing eventually. Now that makes your CV look more focused and also helps in your fellowship applications down the line. Now once you're accepted, how should you schedule your electives? So ideally, like I said, you should be targeting about 3 to 4 electives. Plan them back to back with minimum downtime in between so that you may finish all of them in one go. Now, how to budget out the electives? Like I said in a previous video, budgeting is important, and electives can be supremely expensive or highly economical based on how much research you have invested in planning them out. So do pay attention to little details. Now, the most burning question of all, what all does one learn on an elective? So I thought the best way to answer that would be for me to tell you how my day used to be. So I would go at about 6 a.m. to the hospital and I would pre-round on my patients and I would write my SOAP note, which stands for Subjective, Objective, Assessment and Plan. Now once I had finished that, I would go to the morning report between 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. And that used to be my favorite time of the day. Coming back to the floor at 9 a.m. would be the rounds of the attending, where the attending, the residents and I would go as a team and visit the patients. The patients that I was carrying, I would present them. And then after the presentation was done, we would discuss a little about the management for that patient. Now that used to be a great learning opportunity because you discuss about each patient on a case-by-case scenario. Now, after the morning rounds were over, I would usually go to a noon conference between 12 and 1 and have lunch. And then after that, I would come back to the floor and work with an intern, or basically just hang around and try and understand how the other patients are being managed. Now, after that, I would attend a tumor board or something else, and I would then visit my patient before I left off for the day. While most days were like this, some days used to be when I used to shadow a physician in the outpatient setting. Now, some physicians allowed me to see patients one-on-one and to present to them the case as if I was a resident. So programs have a lot of variation in terms of how much freedom they give to their students. So it is good for you to do a research on how much freedom would you have as a student at that program before you say yes. What should one always take back from an elective? Now, electives are amazing learning experiences, but you should know what are your goals from an elective. First and foremost, you learn how to work in an American healthcare system, which will be very important when you actually start to work as a resident. You learn how to present histories in the SOAP format, and depending on which country you come from, it may or may not come naturally to you. Now, the third is letters of recommendation. While these are important, I highly urge all students to not creep out the attendings because that ruins their experience with all foreign students and makes them sore about taking any more in the future. The other thing is research. While you're in the hospital that you're interested in working at, it is important to keep your eyes and ears open to see what all is going on and then follow up with the people who are doing those research to see if you can actually work with them on a long-term basis. The last and most important thing is that always read when you go back home. The electives are an amazing time to learn everything, and they are greatly helpful when you're actually preparing for Step 2 CK and Step 2 CS. So if you keep yourself updated, it will actually become easier when you're preparing and studying for these exams. So those were my 2 cents on electives, and I hope that answers most of the questions that people had asked me. If there are more, then put them down in the comment section below and I shall address them as soon as possible. Well, bye. Hope you like this video, and you can subscribe if you think that this is pertinent to you and this is helping you. So go ahead, prepare well, good luck.